All right, everyone. Welcome to the Standards Accelerator. My name is Chika Odua, coming to you live. And first of all, let me just say, happy World Standards Day. I am somewhat of a history buff, so let me just inform you all that this day was established in 1970. So since 1970, the world has been recognizing the efforts of scientists and experts in their fields, pretty much celebrating people who are passionate about their work and trying to make sure that the things that we need in our daily lives are working. So this day is all about recognizing their work, raising awareness, showing appreciation, to celebrate and recognize the impact of standards and the value that they bring to our world. So this is very exciting, not only for me, but also for the three organizations which are represented here in this event. So the purpose of this event really is to demystify standards, right? Because it's a very technical term. Sometimes people may not quite know what it is. They may have a general idea, but may not know the specifics. So what we want to do in this event is to really break things down so that we can become more familiar with it and see how it really impacts our everyday lives, because they have a major impact in our lives. So we're going to debunk the mysticism, if I can use that word, of standards. So most importantly, we want to show you how standards can also help everyone to play a role in achieving the United Nations, the SDGs, the 2030 SDGs. And the SDGs, these are shared visions to make the world a better place. And adhering to these standards will help us to actually reach those SDGs. And you all have a role to play as well. All of your organizations are part of the solution to making the world better, to making the world more equitable and a better place for all. So we're here to help. The key word for today, I want us all to remember this keyword, is collaboration. All right, we're going to hear that word several times in today's conversation. That's the keyword, collaboration. Before I introduce our esteemed panel, I just want to break down a few housekeeping rules. Please, if you're not speaking, just try to keep yourself on mute. The button is down below, just kind of a standard for these types of events, just to minimize background noise. Keep yourself on mute. We're going to begin with an explainer about standards, and then we'll go into the Q&A. So during the Q&A, if you want to ask questions, you can unmute yourself and we'll recognize you. But before you do that, just raise your hand. Or if you don't want to speak out loud, fine. You can also just type your question just right here into the Zoom chat box. Another thing to note is we're going to have a poll. So this is going to be an interactive conversation. So don't be shy. I want to hear some of your thoughts. Okay. All right. So the questions will come later, and feel free just to kind of chime in along the way by typing any notes just to come to our attention. So now let's get started. I am so honored to be able to present the world's leading standard organizations today. We have Philip Metzger. He's the General Secretary and CEO from the International Electrical Commission. That's the IEC.
Hi.
Then we have, yes.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hi,
then
everyone.
we have Sergio Mujica, the Secretary General from the International Organization for Standardization, the ISO. And last but not least, we have Mr. Chesa Blee, the Director of the IT Telecommunications Standardization Bureau. Thank you so much for joining us. Excellent. And happy World Standards Day to all. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, it's a pleasure.
Yes, excellent. So to actually move forward, I want each of you gentlemen to give us a fun fact about your organization, something that I may not be able to find on a Google search or on Wikipedia. So Shasib, can you start first? An interesting fact about your organization?
Yeah, ITU. I'm working in the ITU, International Telecommunication Union, the UN specialized agency for ICT technology development. We established in 1865, making us the longest living organization in the UN system. Our long history makes us unique, but also we are unique in the UN bodies, because we are only UN body with a membership, including private sectors like companies and other private areas. So this is ITU.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Philip, how about you? Can you give us something interesting about the IEC, something that I may not be able to find on Wikipedia?
Yeah, thanks, Chica. I mean, maybe you could find it, what I'm going to tell you if you do a long research, but I think the bottom line for me is, I think it's really great to work for an organization like ours, which is so old, but which has managed to stay so young. And I think I'm very pleased today also to see that the organizers of this panel are very young themselves. And I'm not at all trying to be ageist, but the reality is the IEC was founded in 1906. Everybody can look that up. But we have developed over our lifespan a pool of experts of more than 20,000 individuals globally who work for the IEC. And this is not just a group of old hand experts who have done what they've done for the last decades, but this is very much an evolving group. And I'm just coming back from our general meeting this year in Dubai, and I was absolutely fascinated by what our young professionals brought to the table in terms of the discussions, in terms of challenging us, where we should be moving, what kind of aspects we should be looking into more for the future. So I think this lifespan from 1906 to today, and the interaction between the generations, and having something what we call the Young Professionals Program to really make sure we can, in a dedicated way, bring the young interested generation into IEC's business. And many of them move on, they become leaders in the organization in different capacities. I think for me, that was a huge, really put a huge smile on my face, because I think it reflects the vitality. We had a workshop yesterday, an online workshop with hundreds of participants on the interplay between standardization and AI. And I think there as well, it demonstrates the vitality, and we could not do that without the engagement of the young generation who are mingling and who are mixing up the more seasoned people like me.
Excellent. And I've actually seen you talk about the Young Professionals Network in the past. So I know you're very passionate about having young people. And yes, you're exactly right. The IEC and all the organizations are on the cutting edge, very innovative. So thank you so much. And Sergio, how about you? Just an interesting fact about the ISO?
Well, I'll tell you the fact and you will tell me whether it's interesting. 14th of October is World Standards Day, but it also marks the day where a group of 25 countries decided to create ISO exactly 75 years ago in London. And at that very meeting, they had to decide on the name of the organization, because ISO, normally people would think it's International Standardization Organization. No, it's not like that. Actually, in English, it's International Organization for Standardization. But they had these discussions about should be in Russian, in French, in English. At the end of the day, they said, let's do it in Greek, ISOs, which means equals. And that is very much related to our value proposition. We want to sit people on the same table with equal rights, with equal voices to make decisions by consensus.
Well, that is quite interesting, I have to say. So thank you so much for that. And as a photographer, I'm very familiar with the ISO. You guys have made a huge impact, not only ISO, but all the organizations here, the IEC, ITU, you guys have done great work in so many fields. So it really is an honor to have this conversation. So before we actually move to the meat of this event, I want to first toss to a video that you all might find interesting, just to give a brief information about the World Standards Day. So let's just take a look at that. Technical team, we're having some audio issues, so can we just take a look? There's no sound. So let's try it again. let's go back to the video. And if it doesn't work, we'll probably just bring it towards another time in the conversation. Okay, I'm just being told that they're working on it. Let's just give it a few seconds and admire the beautiful eyes before our screen.
It's Murphy's Law. Always works.
It's called the demo effect.
Okay, we'll probably come back to that later. So let's just start with the first question. I actually want to talk about this idea of a shared vision. It sounds very, it's kind of hard to get a grasp on what this shared vision is, because so many industries have their own idea of a vision and how they want to make the world a better place. So Shesa, what would you say would be the shared vision for World Standards Day and for the 3 fellow organizations?
Yes, basically, as we already agreed, the SDG is our key subject. So SDG captures our ambitions for a better world. So achieving this shared vision will call for global actions. So we can reinforce this action by working together. Even in the international standardization area, as you know, the SDG goals are complete with Goal 17, global partnerships. So as the world's 3 leading standard bodies, we see exactly why these SDGs emphasize the importance of partnerships. So participation in standard activities is voluntary, as is the implementation of a standard also voluntary. So inclusive standardization process help us to build voluntary commitment to new ways of working together, that's partnerships. This spirit of collaboration and consensus is exactly the spirit we will need to achieve of these SDGs and the basement of our 3 organizations. So in case of ITU, we are works at the cutting edge of innovation, where the technology always evolving, ITU's work and our membership evolves in line with this innovation. But the role of ITU platform has remained unchanged for over 150 years. So we build the community and the trust to enable technological advances on a global scale. This is especially important in a time of this accelerating digital transformations. So all industry sectors are innovating with digital technologies. This creates convergence. Different industries are moving into new shared space, creating an associated convergence in the responsibilities of different regulatory authorities. So for me, this means even in industry and business domains, they require new shape of partnerships in global scale. So I believe this is the reason why we, these 3 international organizations, under the name of this World Standard Collaborations, we welcome everybody to join with us. So by working together, building on this diverse sets of expertise, we ensure that digital transformation fulfills its great potential to accelerate our progress towards the meeting of these SDGs. That's my view.
Excellent. Shesa, you articulated the video that we were supposed to show. You said it all. You pretty much summarized the video. So thank you for doing that. It's all about the SDGs today. So working in collaboration. And speaking of collaboration, I actually just want to find out who we have represented on this call. So please, in the chat room, just kind of say your organization. I'll just kind of call out and recognize who you all are. Yeah, so all of the organizations, just type them out there and we'll just try to recognize it throughout this event. So thank you so much, just so that we know who's here with us today. So let me go to Philip. We're talking about standards, right? And again, can you just, in the most layman's term, break down what a standard is and how they can actually help us to achieve the SDGs that Joseph talked about?
Yeah, thanks, Chika. I mean, it's always a bit dangerous to ask somebody with a legal background like me to say something in layman's terms, but I'll give it a try, and we'll try to use as little legalese as possible. But if I start maybe with the word normal, I think everybody knows what the word normal means. Maybe I can say that a standard is a sort of a norm that reflects global consensus, really, and collective wisdom. And I think the words consensus and collective, they really are of the essence here, because a standard is something that has been made by humans to fulfill human needs by sharing know-how and by sharing best practice, and all this on a voluntary basis. So this is not just about technical expertise, it is very much about social expertise, because you can't let 20,000 experts work together, exchange views, develop ideas, if there is not social expertise underlying all this. And once you have agreed on a standard in such a setting, such a collaborative and voluntary setting, you actually end up with a sort of maybe I can call it an invisible hand in our everyday life. That is the result of women and men talking to each other and collaborating with each other. And a sort of an invisible hand that makes things, often very complex things, work. And that makes these things work together as well. So if I take an example, we have, for instance, these fancy new foldable screens on smartphones. I mean, no way something complex like that would work without a standard behind it, or several standards behind it. If I think about past experience in my own experience, fiber networks, I mean, to make sure they work properly so that everybody can really telecommute, not just try to collaborate over a blurry phone line, but really have an infrastructure in place that allows you to go to the next stage of online collaboration. No way you could do this without standards, without somebody having prepared standards also to use in that context. Or batteries that don't overheat, that last much longer than we were used from the past, and also that are fully recyclable. So the effect of a standard is very multiple. It makes certainly things safe, something which is at the origin also of the IEC. But also a standard helps market entry, helps new players to come with solutions, and it helps competition. Competition in turn helps and facilitates innovation. And innovation means more choice for consumers and users of any solution. And so I think when we speak about that sort of chain, that logical chain, we'll end up with more efficiency. And more efficiency, of course, also means more sustainability. So you see where I'm going with this. But maybe before we come back to the question of sustainability a little later, if we look at the effect of standards really at the governance level, the way we work and live together as a global society, as a global village, you can say, these standards really matter for policy making, also for regulation, because they provide predictability and they offer a lead for solutions and help risk mitigation. I would even say, to conclude my intervention here, without standards, really the modern world would hardly be manageable, would hardly be governable.
Excellent, excellent. And just to pick off a few points that I heard you say that kind of resonated with me, you used the words consensus and collective, and this falls in line with the key word for today's conversation, which is collaboration. By the way, everyone, if you don't mind, on social media, just hashtagging this conversation, just simply hashtag World Standards Day, and just, tweet out anything that sounds really cool in your ear so that we can have this trending. Let's try to have this trend today. All right, let's try to do it. I think that we can do it. All right, so consensus, collective, you used the word predictability, which was very nice, saying that standards help to mitigate risk, which is very important. Obviously, mitigating risk will help organizations to save money. Also, I like what you said, that standards offer an invisible hand in our everyday life. Very, very poetic there, Philip, an invisible hand. Very good. And also you said that innovation means choice. That's a very interesting way to see standards and innovation, giving choices to people. So thank you so much. Now I'm seeing
Chica, just to get the copyright on the invisible hand right. I was actually
okay,
more.
Sure.
I'm less a poet and maybe more a sort of a legal thinker and also economic thinker. So of course I was lending the concept of invisible hand for Madam Smith. But that's
exactly. As a legal person, yes, we're speaking about copyrights. Excellent. I want to recognize some of the people who are with us. We're getting so many comments. Thank you so much for responding. I see National Meteorology Institute of Germany, South African Bureau of Standards, SABS. Of course, we've got some IEC folks. We've got folks from the Lithuanian Standards Board, USAID, thank you so much. We have all the way from Kenya, we have Uzima University, a representative from there. We have the Bulgarian Institute of Standardization, Standards Council of Canada. We've got the National University of Lujan in Argentina. We have Saudi Standards Meteorology Quality Organization. So a lot of people from all over the world. Thank you so much. And feel free to just bring out some more pointers. I'll try my best to address as many of them as I can. All right. So now I want to go to Sergio. Sergio, I want to ask you a very interesting question, okay? Just be creative with me. Can you paint a picture of what the world would look like without standards?
Okay, I think it could be quite difficult to do our daily life without standards. And let me give you an example. And when I took this job in 2017, I struggled to explain to my children what is this about? What are standards about? And I remember one day I was walking in a small street and I saw a sign of a mother holding the hand of a small child. So I asked my children, what do you think that means? And they say, well, and that there are children in this area, so people need to slow down and to be careful. And then I asked him to look in the back of the sign, and there was the sign of ISO. So whatever you can imagine, symbols, equipment, toys, what kind of safety specification exist because of standards. So it could be a very difficult world to live in. That's the first point. The second one is about the SDGs. Standards are an invitation to excellence. At the end of the day, that's what we propose to the world, excellence, because we bring experts appointed by all the countries, and we ask them, what's the best possible way to do something? Whatever it is, what is the best possible way to do something? And that's why it's an invitation to excellence. And if we link this to the SDGs, we will find that the SDGs represent a global consensus about how to improve the world, how to make the world a better place. So we know the what. We know the what. These are the 17 things that we need to do. We also know the when. We need to do those things by 2030. But standards help us to identify the how. How do we do that journey from today until we have implemented the SDGs? And just to give you one simple example, on SDG 7, on affordable and clean energy, we have a standard on energy management. So any company in the world, any company can use that standard to reduce the use of energy, make savings, and also contribute to the implementation of the SDGs. Or another example could be on SDG 13. We are, around the corner for the COP26 in Scotland. How do we concretely can contribute to achieve SDG 13? And then you have standards on environmental management or standards on carbon capture and storage. So the standards will help you to identify the how. How do you really make it in practice to achieve the respective SDG?
Excellent. I just want to recognize some other people who have joined us. We've got Department of Standards in Malaysia. We've got the Pan American Standards Commission, COPANT, Retirement Fund Incorporated from Malaysia. Excellent. We've got a national standards body in Bangladesh. This is great. This is great. Excellent. Buenos Aires, Argentina, joining us. Excellent. So now I want to take a little quick poll. As it is now, how important are standards in your organizational structure? Are the SDGs actually playing a role in your organizational goals? So yes or no, or if you don't know, just mark it there. If you're to read out your organization's goals, are the SDGs actually articulated in them? Okay, we've got 10 seconds to wait for some more replies. It's not a tricky question, so I'm not trying to trick anyone here. All right, so we've got the results. So 86% of you said that yes, the SDG goals do play a role in your organizational structure. 5% said no, and 8% said don't know. Okay, pretty good. That's very impressive. Thank you so much for that. All right. So now I just want to find out how each of our 3 organizations are actually contributing to the SDGs. Can we start first with Chesa?
Yeah, as I said, IQ, we are focusing on the ICT, information communication technologies. We have got long years of experience, but suddenly during the pandemic, we have a certain experience. So highlighted the paramount importance of these roles and the functions of ICTs. We can't imagine how we maintaining our daily life without ICTs, even during the pandemic. Definitely after the pandemic, it's almost impossible now. So I believe that ICTs make a significant contribution to all 17 goals. If I can choose some particular subject like a good health, now becoming the digital health, quality education based on tailoring educated, the AI-based tailoring educations, even remote education as well, gender equality subject, how this ICT technology support those people who need special assistance, even those who are not familiar with the technical part, and industry innovation and infrastructures, where ICT has a huge influence to innovate them, sustainable cities, smart and sustainable cities, climate actions, and many, many others. So this will extend our, and also requires the digital transformation benefits should be everyone and everywhere. So this is what we learned of this during the pandemic. So again, I want to highlight working together in standardization is a key avenue to achieve of this, and supporting international standards can help us to ensure this improve our quality of life in a global sense.
Excellent. I'm glad you brought up the pandemic. Perhaps one of our participants will bring that up during the Q&A. It's very important. I'm actually curious to find out how it's affected you all's work. Philip, can you talk about how the IEC specifically has worked to address the SDGs? Is there an SDG that's particularly of priority at this time?
Well, I think what we can say sort of in general terms is that really, if we look what IEC is doing, it has an impact on all the 17 SDGs in one way or the other. What I would like to focus on now maybe is, of course, particularly the aspect of decarbonization and the all-electric society, because I think that is really now an absolute hotspot for, I think, for us as a global community, where really the IEC has a lot to bring to the table, because we are ultimately, we are the global standardization organization, and also offering conformity assessment services in the field of electrical and electrotechnological products, processes. And that's why I think we're extremely well placed going forward in contributing to really that aim of decarbonizing and of making sure we are moving to this all electric economy and society. And of course, if we look at our work process, the way the standards are produced, the way the conformity assessment systems are run, it's quite clear that in those discussions, in those work streams, and then how the standards ultimately are articulated and need to be assessed, we have a clear focus here on the question of the design of the products, which are then the object of those standards. I mean, is this an ecological design that is being pursued in the standardization process? And also, of course, the question of circularity of what is standardized and what is assessed. So in terms of durability, in terms also of upgradability, in terms of how you can disassemble products again and how you can repair them, I think we have very clear pointers that matter in the work. If I take a very simple example that I think all have experienced, we used to be able to buy laptops where we could change batteries after a while if they were flat. I mean, now we have mostly laptops which have built-in batteries, and you can maybe change them sometimes if it's a good laptop and you have a good after-sales service that you've purchased, but it's become much more complicated. So things like this, how do you access those parts of an electrotechnical machinery that needs to be repaired, needs to be maintained, needs to be replaced, is, for instance, one of those very concrete aspects. So I think in that sense, we have our DNA as an organization because we're really focusing on electrotechnology and electronics. And I think we have a clear path here to success, if you will, in the future by looking on those aspects that I just mentioned.
Right. I used to enjoy taking out the battery from my laptop. So now that I can't do it, I get really frustrated. But again, I'm just a geek anyway. So thanks for pointing that out. Before I go to Sergio, I want to invite our participants to please share in the chat room, what are some of the main challenges and difficulties that your organization may be facing in terms of achieving the SDGs, and try to talk, specific to your region. This is a global audience. So we've got folks from all over the world. I think all the regions are represented here. So what challenges do you face in trying to address the 17 SDGs? Just share it in the chat room. So Sergio, what about the ISO? Can you specifically name perhaps 2 examples in recent times what your organization has done to help meet any of the SDGs?
First thing we have done is to fully align the ISO strategy to the SDGs. Let me explain. The ISO strategy was just approved last year and goes all the way until 2030. So timeline has been fully aligned. And the second one is about our vision as an organization, because we don't talk about standards, we don't talk about products, processes. In our vision, we talk about people. It's a human-centric vision, making people's lives easier, safer, and better. So that's the first thing. The second one, we have created a mapping tool so you can identify what of the ISO standards are more relevant for you to implement whatever SDGs you're talking about. So you can have the answer of the how. If you want to implement in your organization the SDG related to energy, for example, you immediately know what ISO standards you need to apply that will get you there. And the third element that I think is really crucial is that if you believe that standards are necessary to implement the SDGs, we need to support all our members so they can deliver both at the national and at the international level. And we have a very solid capacity building program to help our developing countries members so they can have a very strong national standard body. And we are celebrating today not only World Standards Day, also the 60th anniversary of DEVCO, our Developing Countries Committee. That's really a landmark and has a lot to do with our vision as an organization. If we want to deliver, we need to make sure that all our members are well equipped to be able to contribute to the implementation of the SDGs.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Sergio. We've now come to the fun part. I want to hear from you all. So please, you can either raise your hand so we can recognize you, or you can just type your question into the chat room. And don't forget the other question I asked earlier about what challenges is your organization facing in terms of trying to confront and address the SDGs. So we've got 2 assignments for you, questions and the challenges. And please don't let me ask any more questions. I'm a journalist, I can ask questions all day long. So, oh, I see a comment here, gender inclusivity in standardization activities. So someone is mentioning that as a challenge. That's a very good point. Bringing in genders, male, women, and all of the above, and trying to have everyone recognized. That's very good. Thank you for that comment. So any questions? Do I see any raised hands? Please don't be shy. Another comment here from our participant says that a major challenge is that the formation of the National Mirror Committee does not necessarily include all relevant stakeholders. Okay, so David, if you want to, you can elaborate on this further. If you want to unmute yourself, if not, that's fine. You can continue typing, but I'd like to know more about what you mean about not necessarily including all of the stakeholders. That's a very good point. And someone else is saying that the uptake and implementation of voluntary standards by the public sector, that's a really good point. Public sector may not always be in line with standards. Very good point. Gentlemen, Felipe, Sergio, Chesa, with any of these comments, you can feel free to kind of chime in to bring some solutions as well. Philip, one of our participants, is saying that a challenge facing his organization is standardization of medical education in the developing countries. So trying to make sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of medical information, public health.
Maybe I can comment. Maybe I can comment, if you want, on the gender equality comment. First of all, I think it's a very valid comment, and it responds to our reality, because we have made a survey to test our technical committees about the gender breakdown, and the truth is that 2/3 of our technical experts are men. So we do have a gap that we need to improve, and we're working on that. That's number one. Number two, when it comes to the standard development process, we didn't have any capacity to assess each of our new standards against any potential gender implication, whether we, in an intended manner, were creating a problem for women or for men. Now that has been corrected, working together with some of our colleagues here, to include in the process a conscious revision of the draft standard to make sure that it's really neutral in terms of gender, not only gender blind or gender neutral, but gender responsive, which is even more important.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I think may I add something on top of this, what Sergio said. We recognize there are many gaps. Gender gap is another important areas, but while we are looking at this, the technical development, we find generation gaps is getting more serious now, especially this, we are getting use of this mobile phone, small mobile phone, but it's very difficult for the aged people and also people who need a special assistance. How we can address them is also another important. Can you imagine with these aged people, with women, and having some of access special assistance is absolutely behind of our daily life. So we do not leave anyone in behind. So even ICT communication aspect, we are relatively comfortable to support of this gender neutrality, but we find sometimes our old standard is not neutral. We find that. So we are continue to find out how we can upgrade of this our standard in such a neutral aspect and also supporting many other gaps. This is what we are doing now.
Chika, if I can come in here as well, very briefly on the question of inclusivity. I think that's of course a key aspect for all our organizations. I mean, we're coming as IEC just out of a general meeting where our members agreed last week on a new governance system where the aspect of diversity, not just gender, not just generational, not just geographical, but really in the broader sense of the term, trying to capture all the facets of that. And we're also institutionally, we want to make sure we can have consistency in a sense. And we've created, and that's in our new governance structure, a diversity advisory committee, so that there is really a dedicated body that can give advice on the representation and on the inclusivity in the organization's dealings, not just dealing with organizational matters, really dealing with the substance as well. And of course, there are important initiatives such as gender responsive standards, really making sure it's not just about participation of men and women, it's also about how the standards are then structured and to what extent are they really not biased, in a certain way. So I think it's a key topic for all of us, and it has got to do also with the fact of the question of inclusivity at the national level. I think I've read somewhere on the chat, or you said it maybe, Chika, that there was a question about how you can include stakeholders, all the relevant stakeholders at the national level. For us, that's part of our DNA, our national committees of our members. They really have to make sure they reach this inclusivity at their level so that they are really representative when coming to the IEC. But this is, of course, something which has to be assessed and reassessed on an ongoing basis. I just saw earlier Guillem was asking a question, but I think he then put the question into the
Guillem Martinez. I was going to ask Guillem, do you still have your question at hand, or has it been answered? Maybe if you can unmute yourself. That's Guillem Martinez. We saw your hand raised earlier. Okay, you can just type it in. But let me go to Carolina. There was a question. Okay, Carolina, I live in Ecuador. I think that culture is a big problem in Latin American countries because there is a fear of change. So how would you guys respond to cultures where there is a sense of inertia, hesitation towards new ideas? What's the best way to deal with that? Because I find that very interesting. Thank you, Carolina, for that observation.
Well, maybe I'll give it a try, and then maybe Chaisab and Sergio want to follow up. I think the question of change, I think, matters in all cultural contexts. It matters also in all organizational contexts. And my sort of experience in this, not only in the IEC but also before, is that once again, I think you have to create an inclusive dialogue so that you can really identify together with the stakeholders, with the members, but also the stakeholders, because we're not just acting for our members. We have a much higher ambition. I think all three of our organizations is that there is a dialogue that results in a common understanding of the challenges, because there can be also hesitations for change in countries which are very advanced, which are extremely in a comfortable or privileged situation, and it's just very comfortable and you don't want to change. But the reality is the world around us keeps evolving, keeps moving. We have not only sustainability as a cross-cutting challenge, but we also have, of course, very concrete challenges of digitization, actually challenges which are opportunities. And I think there's a case there to be made that embracing change will give opportunities and will put you in an advantageous position. And I think, especially if you think about the development aspect of this, I've seen many examples, especially in the field of technology, where countries or societies or certain maybe communities have managed to leapfrog by embracing change. And then suddenly they were ahead of the curve compared to the established players who were maybe dominant for a very long time. I mean, I remember an example, for instance, in mobile financial services. Kenya has been a world leader in mobile financial services for quite a while, and actually being ahead of the curve, even compared to Switzerland. I think if I think about 5 years back, we were quite nowhere with mobile banking. I was somebody who always liked it, but I was quite a minority. And so I think the potential there is something that has to be explained, has to be explored as well. And I think that can open the door to change more easily.
Excellent. We've got some participants from Kenya. So thank you for mentioning that. Yes, we've seen that Kenya and East Africa generally has been on the cutting edge of IT and mobile technology. So Guillermo, I did see your question. So Mr. Gim is asking about enforcement because standards are by nature kind of non-binding. So what are the best mechanisms to try to make sure that they're adhered to by as many people and organizations as possible? Chesip, can you respond to that? How can we enforce these standardizations? What are the best mechanisms to move forward with enforcement?
As I said, if I want to follow this, what Philip said with this link of these questions. So now we are really international standard organization as a challenging international standard to apply everybody. It's a big challenge now because we have to take into account the cultural difference, geographical difference, and the economic difference. We have to take into account of this. So my understanding is international standards provide technical frameworks. Based on this, my wish is, based on this, each region, each nation, even in communities, they have some ability to tailor it based on these technologies, technical frameworks. We need a standard in the infrastructure level because we have to connect it. Everything is compatible. So infrastructure level, we have to definitely ensure this interoperability. But upper levels like applications, some of the services, we are willing to have some provide flexibility to meet, to align with these cultural or national differences. So that if we can reach like a very good harmonization or orchestration between regional, national, and international standard activities, we may reach such difficulties to solve that.
Maybe I can try with the previous question about whether an enforcement mechanism is necessary here. And I think this relates very much to the very nature of standards, because as I said before, standards are an invitation to excellence. So they are voluntary, while laws and regulations are mandatory, and they really set a minimum. What is tolerable for a society? So that's why a law needs to set that minimum. But we're not talking about minimums here. We're talking about the maximum possible effort. What's the best way to do something? So an enforcement mechanism is not appropriate here. But however, what is indispensable is to make sure that when you promise something, you are being truthful and people can rely and trust what you are promising. And that's why we have a conformity assessment mechanism. So we set the rules for somebody to certify whether what you have said is true in real life.
Excellent. We're running really low on time, so let's just keep the responses very succinct, right? Punit is asking, how prepared is the ISO for digitalization? Is there an action plan in the making? Sergio, that's for you.
The answer is yes. We need to improve our processes and also our tools so we can have a fully virtual standard development process. And that's number one. And second, regarding accessibility, how do we consume the standards? We are working very hard to have machine readable standards, something that can be directly read and interpreted by machines.
Excellent. And I'm seeing there's so many comments coming in. Thank you so much. I would definitely save this conversation and try to email it to everyone so that we can kind of go back and get a grasp of all the notes. I'm seeing lots of great information. Nectaria says, I believe a big problem or challenge here in Greece for big companies that are working with smaller size companies and individual contractors is that unfortunately, there's a lack of understanding of the importance of standards. That's a good point. And David talks about the EU, how the standards there's a harmonized standard practice. But again, the issue is that enforcement is a challenge because these are not mandatory. So very good here. Eduardo, I see your question. Let me get to you right now. So Eduardo says the update of the ISO 28000 standard supply chain security management system was stopped due to the pandemic by the TC 292 committee. When will the new version of ISO 28000 be published?
Well, the honest answer is I don't know. But let me explain the context. With the pandemic, we had to move overnight from an environment that was basically face-to-face. We had 85% of our meeting of the technical committees in a face-to-face manner to a 100% virtual manner. And it has been very successful, actually. We have managed to continue delivering on our core business, which is standards. But all the technical committees had to reprioritize their activities. So in that process, maybe the update on one specific standard could have been delayed. But I will follow up on this one in particular.
Chika, can I just come in here? Because as I sort of said, following up, I think we have fantastic questions here in the chat. We can't address them all. As you said, we're running low on time. I think it would be great if we can, give an answer to those questions, the three of us afterwards offline, to the persons who asked them, because I think they show a great interest, and also I think a great potential for these individuals also being advocates for the cause of standards. Because again, I think ultimately the bottom line is this will help us going forward as a society, and also in terms of sustainability.
Very good, very good. And there was a question, just one last one to address to Chessup here. It was a question about the priorities right now in your organization. As the year ends, what is the priority for the ITU? And this will be our very last question.
Yeah, our priority is now aiming for SDGs. As I said, just to quote some of SDG cases, the target goals, this is becoming of this because ITU is a UN special agency. SDG is a UN mission. As a part of a special agent, we are aiming for this SDG is most important. Even our members fully support. They are willing to contribute their effort to meet of these SDGs. Even we do not differentiate which SDGs is more priority than others. We are trying to, depends on our members' contribution, but we are focusing on these SDGs.
Excellent. On that note, we're going to have to end this conversation. This was very vibrant, and I hope that you all picked up a few things. I know I picked up a world of information, so thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. So now, as we end it out here, we're just going to try to play that video again. And thank you all so much. It was a pleasure.
I want to live in a world that cares about our planet.
A world that's inclusive and sustainable, where sustainable solutions are accessible to all.
I want to live in a world where there's peace,
prosperity, justice.
That's innovative and resilient.
Everyone deserves access to healthcare, water, and food.
We want a world that's better, fairer, more sustainable for all.
With your help, we can achieve this vision for a better world.
International standards happen when people around the world choose to work together.
They offer solutions we can all get behind. So learn about standards.
Participate in standards.
Use standards
so we can all make a difference.
Join the movement.
And share your vision for a better world.
On that note, thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your day. Happy World Standards Day.
Happy World Standards Day.
Bye.
Everyone, thank you all so much.
Bye.
Excellent.
Bye-bye.